Hey, Job here. On this channel, I invest 100% of my income and live out of my Robinhood brokerage account. Today, you get to see that in practice and see in what and how I invest my full $2,386 weekly paycheck and how I pay bills on margin. If we hop right over to the weekly flow chart here, we'll just step through quickly how this all works before we do it live. So I have my full paycheck that comes in, right? So $2,386 a week roughly, so roughly 10.3K a month. That all gets transferred over to my taxable brokerage account, the full amount, and I invest 10% of it into growth ETFs, so anything between QQQM, AVLV, VGT, ORR, CLSE, VU, SPMO, anything that might be lower that week or over the last few simple moving average days. And yeah, and all these dividends that come in for the growth ETFs, those all get reinvested, not into themselves, but in whatever is low that week or that month. And 90% of that income goes to high yield income ETFs. So that's the bulk of my paycheck, right? Because the idea there is that I really want to replace my salary as quick as possible, especially after the layoff that happened a few months back. This used to be actually a 60-40 split, but I've switched that over just to really front load that salary replacement. And so, yeah, that invests in XPay, TSPY, TDAQ, LPI, KGLD potentially. A lot of different options there. I tend to focus on roughly the safer yielders, anywhere between the 10 to 20% yields. And any dividends that come from there, that gets deposited to cash and margin, only for the monthly payers. For the weekly payers, I've been actually reinvesting those as you've been seeing, just to kind of, again, help compound the salary replacement. So right now that's like roughly 5.8K and growing, right? And then the idea is that I'm almost kind of treating my brokerage like a bank, right? I'm basically arbitraging the 4.5% margin interest blended yield that I get. So I get roughly a 30% blended yield. So that's like a pretty big spread, right? Of like kind of 25.5% yield essentially. But instead of kind of just paying myself a small interest rate like a bank might do, I'm kind of keeping that whole spread. So it's keeping it very positive. And then the idea there is that I borrow against my full assets as they keep growing every week and pay all my bills on margin. So my bills range anywhere between 7 to 9K every month. And that all comes out of the account. And realistically, what gets added to margin every month is basically just the difference between my monthly expenses and my monthly dividends that come in. So depending on what my monthly expenses were that month or what my dividends are, that what gets added to margin might be anywhere between 2.2 to 4.2K a month. Although it's actually a little bit more these days, given that I'm doing the weekly dividend reinvestment, but you get the idea there. Only the difference get added, not this full expense amount, right? And yeah, I'm doing that all in the goal to replace my salary with monthly income from my portfolio and retire early by 40 years old in 4 years from now. So that's how I fully live out of my Robinhood brokerage account and invest 100% of my paycheck. And now let's just see this in practice, right? We're going to step through this whole thing live. So if we pop over to Robinhood, we see that today is a nice red day. So as I kind of always say, I'm always very excited to invest on red days where you can kind of buy things for cheap. Down a lot today, 5.57K and 2.58%. So let's see what we should buy today. So we'll start by growth as usual. So first things first, I'll actually just transfer over money, right? So I'll just have to do this from off screen on my Robinhood Banking app. Hopefully sometime soon they actually do it so that you can actually do it on the desktop. That'd be nice. But let's just get that transferred over. So I'm transferring over $2,386.02. We're investing every penny of that. So do that and get that transferred over. We'll see this update in a second here. So you'll see my net value update over here. Yep, there you go. You'll notice that my buying power went up by double the amount of that paycheck, right? So to 84.8K. That basically ups my margin total by the amount of the paychecks. And then also my margin goes down by that exact same amount of the paycheck because automatically on Robinhood, our margin balance gets paid down by a paycheck being transferred over or any money. And then the cash available for withdrawal, this is roughly that gets added to by the exact amount of the paycheck. So the only thing that doubles up is the buying power because for every dollar you put in, they let you borrow the same amount. So let's just get that fully invested. So let's just bring this up on screen here. So 23.02. And let's just start by the growth side of things. So if we pop over to the spreadsheet just to see what's red on the growth side of things. So anything in this column, right? So we see that AVLV is slightly under red today, DRAM and ORR. ORR I'm kind of just leaving for now, so I'm looking at DRAM and AVLV. But let's just see the find a dip tool on Snowball, which by the way, there's a referral link below if you're interested in the description. And also you can always see my portfolio for this for free and see all these same numbers. But let's see what's low. So on the 50-day, on the growth side of things, so DRAM here I'm seeing QQQM, VGT, SPMO. So probably down to DRAM or QQQM here. Even on the 10-day, let's kind of take a look. Yeah, QQQM down quite a bit here. You can kind of see, and DRAM less so actually in the last kind of week and change, right? So maybe let's do QQQM. It is pretty in the green, right? Because I've held QQQM for a while now, but is that down the most today? It is down the most today. Yeah, let's just do QM. So $238 into QM. So let's do that. And if we take a look on it, actually, we can see when's the last time I invested into it. It's been a bit since I invested into it in these lows here. So that's why I'm up quite a bit, but it's definitely come down some, right? So let's just do that. So let's just do $238 in QQQM and buy that little dip that happened. So we can kind of see how much it's dipped, right? Probably driven a lot by some of the Google drops today. So let's just do that, $238. So this is like 10% of the paycheck, right? Great. And so that's the growth side invested. So minus $238. If we divide this by 2, we'll kind of, I tend to like to split the high yield buys in 2. So typically one on just like a safer yielder and then maybe one on like a higher yielder. So let's see. So we have 1074 and 1 cent to invest in the high yield side. So 90% of the paycheck. So let's just take a look at the find a dip tool again. So let's take a look at the 50-day here. So Goop, I'm ignoring for now, though this is a nice dip from Google, just because I only invest any of my YouTube income back in Google, and then it pays me back. Keep growing that, but I'll be excited to drop next week's Gumroad payment, for example, into that. Alti and YMAX, as I've said, I'm ignoring for now. Chippy has been down quite a bit over the last 2 months. It's kind of come down from its highs, right? You can kind of take a look here where it's come down, right? So it's actually kind of to the last time I bought, really. I bought just a little bit here, but you can kind of see here that potentially could be a good one. GIAX down similarly as well. Blocks, just crypto has been get hard. KGLD, TDAQ down quite a bit. So it's probably down to between those. So as far as the safer yielders, you can kind of definitely see TDAQ, right? So that kind of catches my eye there with how much it's down, even more so than like say T-SPY. So let's definitely do TDAQ first. And it's down quite a bit more today too with the dip. So let's do that. 1074.01. And buy that dip. Great. And you'll see that this amount goes down by the exact amount that I invested. So TDAX invested. So we got that. And then let's see, what should we do for the second one? Could potentially do Chippy. Could potentially do GIAX. Could kind of down to one of these 3. These are all 3 in the ultra yielders. So we had Chippy open. Let's just have a look at GIAX and blocks. So we can kind of see where I've invested, right? So I've been kind of buying the dip in GIAX as it's kind of dipped more, right? You can see how it's recovered nicely from the Iran dip back in March. And now it's kind of coming down. Blocks is kind of just being hit as hard as crypto is, less so than crypto actually, which is nice. But it's kind of in the lows here. And then Chippy kind of coming down to where I last invested roughly back in May. But still, most of my investments happen in this channel here. So I think, at least for Chippy, like I still think like the semiconductor play is still intact. I think this is just kind of temporary headwinds where it is kind of, but do I think it'll still drop? That I don't know. It could potentially still drop back all the way to here, and I could still kind of buy, right? But looking at blocks, looking at GIAX, this is like roughly 50% of where it was at. This is actually, they're at kind of similar points of like how much they've dropped compared to their highs. But I think GIAX out of all 3 is a little bit more diversified, right? It holds kind of like VU, mid cap, small cap, international, and then kind of writes credit put spreads on some single stocks. So it basically generates 24% yield. So I'm thinking I might just do GIAX in this case this week. Kind of keep it a little bit more diversified, even though this is in the ultra yielders. So these kind of fall into this category here. So Chippy's the only one in the green here, and GIAX just trailing right behind it. But it has the potential to kind of still recover nicely, given its good credit spreads. So I'm thinking let's just do GIAX potentially today. And it's down how much today? 1.77. 1.77, 73, and blocks is down 0% today, actually, right now. Let's just do GIAX, buy that dip. Because I'm thinking Chippy will probably dip a little bit more, and I'll try to catch it maybe a little further down from there potentially. But we'll see. Chippy is just so, you can kind of see how big these swings are. They get pretty crazy. But let's just do GIAX. So where's my GIAX? And also, while we're at it, let's also just kind of quickly take note of my current income here. So 5837.53, just so we can compare it to after we update the spreadsheet, how much we actually made this week through the investment. So let's just do that. 1074.01 and buy. Great. So that's the Paycheck fully invested here. So you can kind of see that the buying power went down by exactly the Paycheck amount, right? The margin used ticks back up to what it was before. Margin total stays the same because all the money stays in the portfolio. And then the same amount came off the cash bill for withdrawal here. But now, before we update the spreadsheet, let's actually just pay our bills so that we don't have to update it twice here. So today, there's only one bill to pay. So I have my BOA Summit credit card here to pay. So $1887.72. I got to pay that by the 24th, tomorrow. So this is my Alaska card. So I get my air miles from this. And this is how I pay for most of my trips, right? Like my international trip last year to Japan, where I proposed to my wife. That's paid for that in miles. I paid that trip it was like $100 for both of us, and then the rest was in miles. We just booked our Korea honeymoon trip for next year, and that cost us $12 for both our departure tickets. I love using miles, so it's basically a split between kind of my Summit card for travel miles, my Robinhood Gold card for cashback, for 3% cashback, and then my Chase Amazon for any Amazon purchase where I get 5% cashback. So these are kind of my three main cards that I use in that sense. So let's just get this transferred over to my Robinhood Banking savings account. So again, I'm just going to do this off screen here just because for some reason you can't do it on the transfers here on desktop, only on mobile. So let me just get that transferred over. So 1887.72 and get that transferred over to my savings account. And then I'll pull that money after this video. So do that. Great, you should see this update, and this will actually go down. So you see the net value go down, and that's important to note as well too. And the buying power goes down by double the amount that you take out, right? So you'll see this drop to 78.6K. And yeah, just because that question comes up a bunch, right? It's important to note that like your net value will go down if you take out margin, right? Because what doesn't go down is your gross portfolio value. So if we switch to my portfolio view, right? So this gross value amount, this doesn't go down because you just keep adding to this every week, and then you minus out your margin used, and then you get your net portfolio value. So this is what displays on Robinhood. Right? So the more you add to margin, the more your net value comes down. But what doesn't change is your gross value, because I'm not selling anything to pay my bills. I'm taking a loan against basically all my assets, right, to pay my bills. So the gross value is what doesn't change, but the net value will fluctuate with your margin balance and with the market and all that. So very important to note, just because that question comes up a bunch in the comments. But now that that's all done, so we've invested my full paycheck, we've paid bills, we've basically gone through this whole thing, and then now we're just gonna update the spreadsheet. So let's just do that. Like I say, I like kind of doing both. I have my manual spreadsheet and then also my Snowball, just because that Snowball's automated, but my spreadsheet, you can kind of see how things change, right? And I have some extra numbers there that Snowball doesn't necessarily get. Gotta update margin total, margin used here. So we've crossed into 200K of margin used, which is quite a bit. And then now we'll add just all the positions we invested in. So let's do that. QQQM. So this will be a little bit of an average up because I'm very on the green on this, right? So let's do that. And then we invested into TDAQ as well. So this will be a nice little average down. And yeah, this is something you wouldn't necessarily see if you were using Snowball, right? So I like kind of doing both. I'm just a weirdo like that, just because it is nice to see visually what gets averaged down and up. And then, by the way, if you're interested in my spreadsheet, I offer that on Gumroad for basically the price of a coffee, $5 one-time fee, essentially. So that's TDAQ here, updated, and then GIAX. So this will be a nice average down as well. Cool, GIAX. Great. So with all that updated, my gross value is now sitting at 417.7K. So that's if you add up all the assets in the portfolio, right? My margin used is sitting at 200 200.1K, and then my net value sitting at 217.5K. So that's after all my bills paid and after everything's inputted. It's nice. Today we're able to buy the dip. We'll see where it goes from there. Seems like it's kind of trending back up after this, but also could very much go down. Probably will. That's anything's to go by when I do my buys. But with that, my margin health is sitting at 52% equity, essentially, a little above that. My gross margin and net portfolio value all sitting the same. My margin maintenance value is sitting at 104.4K. So this is the amount my portfolio would have to drop to basically trigger a margin call, right? So that's a 113.1K buffer right now. And then with that, my buying power is sitting at 78.6K. You get that by doing your margin total minus your margin used. And then if you take half that amount, that's your cash available for withdrawal. So 39.3K essentially. So right now I'm insulated from basically a 27% portfolio drop before a margin call gets hit. So definitely under 30% now. We'll get that up over time, but this will fluctuate with the market, right? And this is a down week. So this is why it's lower than normal. As far as my monthly income, we can kind of take a look here. So let's just take that. So if we minus that out, minus that one, we've basically created $39.53 of monthly income today. So if we times 12 that, we've basically added $474 in annual income this week, which is awesome. You can kind of imagine that, like, say the 39.53, right, times 12 times 52, that potentially if we did that same amount every week, could add up to $24,666 in annual income just through that investment. So that you can really see how powerful that is as far as like the yearly dividends, right? So that makes it so that now my monthly dividends are sitting at $5,877 a month, 70.5K a year, 1.3K a week, and $193 a day. So roughly a 30.50% yield, which is great. And then again, this is not for free, right? Like, I'm paying margin interest on this big margin balance, right? 4.5% interest. So that's roughly $746 a month, but I'm making 5.8K a month. So that's a really big positive margin spread, right? This just keeps getting bigger. So it's a 5.1K positive margin spread a month. So 26%. And then really this 30% distribution yield, this is all against the high yield income assets, right, of the portfolio. If you go off the full portfolio value, I'm sitting more at like a 17% yield if you look at that. So if we actually look at that, so on the growth side, I'm sitting at 186.4K. And then on the high yield income side, I'm sitting at 231.2K. So 44% for the growth and 55% for the high yield income. So this is tilted some since last week because I changed from SCHD to AVLV, right? And also OVL. So things have switched a little bit more to high yield income here. But that's the whole process, right? So we basically got to step through this whole flow live. You got the step through before it, and then also got to see it live. So you get to see it in theory and in practice. Hopefully that was useful to see. You can kind of really see practically how I'm living out of my brokerage, right? Everything flows through the brokerage account. Any income I get gets invested, and the compounding is never interrupted. That's the idea. And as usual, if you want to support the channel, best way is to check the description below. You'll get all my free links, my paid links as well. You can get my free Snowball portfolio link and see all these same numbers for yourself. Nothing's hidden. And then I'll catch you in the next video on Sunday for the portfolio update. But in the meantime, if you want to catch up on the last portfolio update, check out the bottom left of the video. Peace.